Okay, let's talk about the police. Now, you've probably seen other commentators talking about the fact that only around 30 arrests were made this weekend at the Unite the Kingdom far-right marches, which were very aggressive, loaded with hate speech, flipped over into violence and vandalism repeatedly, and yet a relatively small number of arrests were made, compared with the hundreds and hundreds of arrests that have been made at peaceful anti-genocide protests of elderly people, retired doctors and vicars sitting around with signs saying that they oppose genocide and support Palestine action. There's another detail which may have passed you by, which is that the police declined this weekend to use their facial recognition cameras that they have. These are cameras which are controversial already, which can be used to scan crowds and try to match faces in a crowd with images that they have previously received or collected of people accused of crime. Now, these cameras are controversial, firstly, because there's just a very obvious intrusion of privacy. Secondly, because they have a pretty poor rate of incorrectly matching people, and then of course people getting dragged in and dragged across the coals for things that they had absolutely nothing to do with, being expected to prove where they were 5 years ago on a Wednesday. Also because Kelsapries, these cameras, it turns out, match people of colour very, very, very much more inaccurately than they do with white people, and very much more quickly. So it means that this false accusation rate is absolutely through the roof for people of colour, and that obviously is racist and shouldn't be happening. There's also an issue of the fact that using these cameras encourages people to wear masks, and that in itself creates like an arms race between the police and protesters, and it really makes absolutely no sense for that stuff to be used. I understand that there's an argument for using these cameras, but that's a different argument to be had. You can argue that it would have been a good idea to use them at the Unite the Kingdom march. But for contrast, and I really cannot think of a clearer way to throw into relief how racist the British police are, they didn't use them at the Unite the Kingdom marches. They did use them at, and you think I'm going to say, the anti-genocide marches, or this, that, or the other, or even Black Lives Matter. They did use them at Notting Hill Carnival, a festival of music and dancing celebrating African and Caribbean heritage. Yeah, they are scanning those people to see if they can match them with any previous criminal cases, and they are not scanning Tommy Robinson fans. We know that the police are institutionally racist. A report about the Metropolitan Police, independently published, I'm not entirely sure how long ago, I'm guessing it's probably coming up to sort of 7-10 years ago now, literally straight up said that they were institutionally racist. And this is really standard, and it's not surprising at all. An interesting case study is Greece, which is one of the few democracies where people are invited to vote near their place of work rather than near their home address. And this gives us the opportunity to look through that data and pair out the trends based on what people's profession is likely to be. And of course, there are polling stations close to police stations, and that means that they have high numbers of police voting at those particular polling stations. And we can then look through that data and work out that about 50% of the Greek police vote fascist. And there's no reason to suppose that the UK police are any different. We also know that there are innumerable cases of the police behaving atrociously. We know the statistics on police officers being accused of sexual assault, of rape, of all that kind of stuff. We've seen specific cases ranging from Sarah Everard to all of the, Mark Duggan, and all of these people who've had the most horrific treatment and whose cases demonstrate the institutional bigotry and the absolute uselessness of our police service. This has a knock-on effect. It becomes a loop. And it does that because when the police are focusing on arresting people of colour, those people end up just more likely to be accused of something and more likely to be convicted of something. Everybody, all of us, have at some point broken the law in some small way, whether it's driving above the limit or smoking marijuana or whatever. And if you just happen to get hauled in by the police on the day that that's what you've got in your pocket or whatever, then you can end up with a criminal record. And because the police service target people of colour in this way, this feeds into a problem where then when the data is published by our supposedly left-wing government, the right wing picks up on it and says, see, statistically, certain ethnic groups are more likely to commit crime, when the reality is simply that people from those ethnic groups are more likely to be arrested. I'm not telling you anything new here, and it feels odd to be saying it in a way because black and minority communities have been saying this for a long time. And as women, we also know the other way in which this works, which is that when the police don't act on sexual crimes against women, women stop going in to report those crimes because they know they're going to be disbelieved and they're not going to stand any reasonable hope of getting any justice, and the whole process is going to be hugely traumatic. And yeah, I simply don't report these things when they happen to me because for that exact reason, and it creates a loop. The problem at heart is that the police are broken. And if you're thinking, but we need them, because what if I get burgled? Let me tell you for free, I and many people I know have experienced burglary. At best, they wander around and sniff a bit and give you a crime number. The percentage of crimes that they solve is trivial when it comes to the sort of real crimes that we want solved. Instead, what they're doing is a tick box exercise, trying to make themselves look important, but in actual fact, achieving absolutely nothing and actually making life worse and worse and worse, especially for people on the left, for protesters, for people of colour, and for women, and all of the above. We don't need to reform the police. We need to close them down. Ban these facial recognition cameras. Take away as much of their power as we can, as quickly as possible, because that, in actual fact, takes the power away from the far right. If they're not going to even arrest these guys when they're wandering around towns, beating people up, spewing hate speech, vandalizing things, if they're not even going to arrest these guys, we're not protected by the police. So let's get rid of them. See you next week. Increasingly, the mainstream media is terrible at informing the public of what is really going on. I'm only able to make these videos because people are generous enough to sponsor me making them, and if you're able to be a part of that, I would hugely appreciate it. It can cost as little as $1 a month and you'll get loads of fun bonus content and lots of extras from me and my undying gratitude. I also massively appreciate it if you're able to like, share these videos and let people out there know what's going on.